And good evening and welcome to City Focus. I'm Marty Olsen, your host, and I'm delighted to have in studio with me tonight a longtime friend, a gentleman who I met back in the early mid-1980s, and at that time I was very active in the contracting business, and I was hired to do some work on the family homestead up on William Street, and for those folks who wonder how the heck I ever got into politics, Clerk Lyke and his wife Barbara were instrumental because they were very encouraging to get involved. And damn if I didn't. So Clark, I want to thank you for coming on.
Well, I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad you got involved. And I'm glad to tell you that everything you built is still hanging in there.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah. But we always enjoyed talking to you. You have a different perspective sometimes, and you know we could get on, and we didn't get in each other's hair about it, and we just let it flow.
Yeah, well, as it should be. You know, we should be able to have a civil discourse on the issues
Absolutely.
of the day at whatever level we're discussing them.
I even talked to John Russell.
That could be challenging sometimes. And his, I think his son, doesn't he live next door to you now?
Yes, he does.
So John must be up there periodically visiting.
I saw John. I had something I want to give to the Homeless Hospitality Center recycle shop, whatever they call it, and Homeward Bound, I guess it's called.
Yeah.
And he came up and picked it up, and he asked me about something I had given to another group, and we're still wondering how to use it. But you know, if you don't need something, you want to give it to somebody who can maybe find a home for it, and they're a good group.
Okay, well that's very good. So, like I say, I've known the Lykes, well, it's like I said, it's a good 35 plus years.
80s, I don't recall exactly when, but I think it's 81, 82, maybe.
Yeah.
My wife would know.
Well,
she makes note of things like that. I can't remember what day it is most of the time.
yeah. Well, I know that I answered the call when the local GOP literally sent out a flyer of like this. It was just a piece of paper folded up like that. And when I opened it up, I think it literally said, "We need help." And
Still do.
And they do. And I responded at that time, and that was 1984. And lo and behold, they had me on the ticket in 1985.
Yeah, you skipped one.
And 87 I won.
87 you won.
And
it's tough, Marty. I know I have told you this, and it's no secret, and I advise anybody that can't get elected. I've said join the Democratic Party. You know, if the idea, if you've got something you can give to the community, give it to the community. Offer yourself. You do a lot of good work. Who cares what your title is? And I know it means a lot to you, and you stuck with it, and that's great. I would have compromised myself and become a Democrat. I really would have.
But you are a Democrat.
Well, I know. If I were you.
Well, you know, but you also served a term on the New London School Board, and yet, what did you draw straws, or somebody got the bad penny? And I mean, you and Burton Chaparro.
They had an interesting thing, was that we had a young man from Connecticut College who decided to run. He was a senior, or going to be a senior, and he decided it would be good for his resume to run, And he took a lot of votes away from myself and Bert. And I kind of objected to that a bit. I mean, they can vote. Students at Connecticut College can vote. But I'm not sure I like them voting in elections that are municipal government elections. They vote in presidential elections because they're living someplace else. So we had a tie. Bert Chaparro and I tied, and we had a recount. And I lost one vote, and he lost one vote. So we had another tie. They decided to put our names in a hat. And my name got picked out. And Bert said, "Thank God." And Bert and I became very good friends.
Bert was a very, very interested and involved in our local government. And he held the council's feet to the fire for a long, long time.
He certainly did. He was into maintenance a lot.
At the sub base. That was his job. He was
in the city too.
Yeah.
He liked things fixed in the city. And he was always walking around. He checked everything out.
No, he's a good man. Bert was a good man, good supporter of mine over the years. And
I think we've had some very good Republicans on the council. And I'm sorry that we don't have in New London, we don't have minority party representation in elections. Every other town in Connecticut, you can't elect all Democrats or all Republicans to a post, but you can in New London.
And it's since we've changed our government to the elected mayor, it's become even more challenging because the year that the mayor runs, it galvanizes the majority party. They get more people out and they stay on the party line. It makes it very, very difficult. I mean, we've had, since then, I think there's been at least 3 councils that have been 7-0 Democrat, and there's been 3 that have had 1. One was Spracacci, and I served on 2 as the only Republican.
It's unfortunate when I can sit here and I can tell you what Republicans made it to council. I can't do that with Democrats. There's too many.
That's right. Well,
yeah.
There's a couple of councilors on there now I don't know.
Well, my first real challenge, I wasn't city clerk very long when Willie Nahas, a Republican, took the presidential seat on the council, we called mayor in those days.
Yep.
Willie Nahas, a Republican, became a mayor. And I had one of the people from the Democratic Party came up to me and said, "Well, I guess you're going to have to get a new job, Clark." I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, you got a Republican mayor." I said, "Yeah." I said, "Willie and I get along just fine. I'm still going to do the same good job that I do for anybody." It's not a political job. Once you get that job as city clerk, you're not political. You can't be. But nonetheless, I felt obligated to ask you, why do you think I have to worry about Willie? He's a Republican. I said, well, let me tell you this, and I must thank my wife for this. My wife's family lived on Hill Street in New London. The Bozensky family lived on one floor, and the Nahas family lived upstairs. And times were tough, and they took care of each other's children, and when there was no food, they fed each other. And Willie Nahas is going to kick me out? Not going to happen. So we got on.
Yeah. Now that would have been short-sighted too. I mean, it's just not. You want, in terms of the administration of your government, an element of stability, and I think that's important. And
you have to.
You did a terrific job as clerk, and you trained Michael Tranquita well, and he did a terrific job when he followed you, when you decided to step down.
Certainly did. You have to have a long view to be the city clerk. You really should be a city clerk for years. And not just to learn what you have to do, but to learn about the city. The documents we have in the vault, and I haven't been to the new vault, I understand it's very nice. We have the old documents from the 1600s that say reference King George and the colonies, and these books, you can open them up and they're just like brand new. They're wonderful penmanship with a quill pen, with a candle, no mistakes. And those books are still there and they're preserved. But now, there's no people to look at those books. Nobody sees them anymore because we've got a pristine vault and everything's put away and locked up. It's saved. Well, it was saved before. The thing was, we used to have school children that would come to City Hall and we'd take them on tour. We'd take them up to council chambers and explain the structure of government. We would take them into the clerk's office and show them the old documents and the ordinances. Just take the ordinances of the city of New London. The first ordinance, okay, we're a city one day, and they get together and they say, well, what should be the first law? We got to have a good one. We need a law. What should it be? And they thought about it, and they finally came up with the first ordinance for the city of New London, restricting swine from going at large in the street.
Well, I guess that was important at the time.
It was important because they had swine fever, and they had those nice shoes that get all, they're made of nice thin leather and they didn't last. But it's kind of funny when you say, well, what was the first law you had in Connecticut or in New London? And it's restricting swine. And then the second and third was the packaging of bread. The labeling of bread to say how much it weighed, what was in it, and how much it cost, so that you didn't get every loaf you got that wasn't different. They had standardization. That's a very important law to have that early on. Well, but you're going to lose all that. It's all behind closed doors now.
Well, you have been kind of the local historian on our code of ordinances as well as the city charter. I mean, and you have worked over many years since you've retired.
Yes, I did.
Reviewing those documents and looking for inconsistencies of things that perhaps are a bit dated, that are not even appropriate at this time, and to try to get them taken out of the code of ordinances, which can be done easily by council.
Yes,
charter is a little more challenging because it's all got to be part of a charter.
No, the charter. We published the charter and the code of ordinances in the same binder for convenience, but they got nothing to do with each other. They relate to each other, but they should be separate documents. And now I would say the charter ought to stay separate. I worked until last year. I took my big, thick code of ordinances with all my hand notations, all my revisions, all the letters that had been written and stuffed in there applied to certain sections, notes from the state of Connecticut, notes from the DEP, where New London, you're kind of overstating your boundaries in the water because you don't own the water out there off Ocean Beach. The state of Connecticut owns it. And I put that book I wrapped it all up and I threw it away because nobody cares anymore and nobody wanted to hear about it, and they got tired of me talking about the damn ordinances. And I'll just give you one that's kind of a stupid ordinance that comes up every summer. There are 2 live ordinances in the city of New London on how close you can get to the shore with a boat. One says 250 feet. The other one says 350 feet. They both have a fine, but one's cheaper than the other. So I'd go with the cheaper one. The other thing is, we can't enforce that ordinance. 350 feet off of Ocean Beach does not belong to the state of Connecticut or does not belong to New London. It belongs to the state of Connecticut. The state of Connecticut has jurisdiction there. You can't tell somebody they can't get any closer than 300 feet. You don't want them driving up on the beach, for sure. But take a look at the cove between Ocean Beach and Waterford. That little cove, All Life Cove, I think it's called.
Yep.
Is that 350 feet from the beach? And are there boats that go back and forth there? Yes, there are. But we look the other way. You kind of have to, because it's a stupid ordinance, and it ought to be taken out.
But it hasn't. I mean, I was on a couple of councils when you were presenting a lot of your work, personal work, and you were charged with that as well. I mean, that you
Yes, I
were,
was.
I mean, it wasn't like you were doing this on your own. The council had charged you with doing this.
But they didn't want results.
And when you would come in with your recommendations, they were somehow summarily, I would say, ignored or gummed up enough that they'd be put back in committee, never to be seen again. It was awful.
That's very accurate. But you've been there.
Well, I have, and I've seen a lot of work that's been buried in that fashion.
You know, ordinances should not be funny, but I get I find a lot of humor in them. But they shouldn't be funny.
No, but you know, you express yourself with modern technology.
I go on Facebook a lot.
Utilizing Facebook, and I enjoy that. I mean, you and I are Facebook friends, and you do post frequently, sometimes many times a day, on many different topics. And a lot of stuff passes through. You just keep going. But when I see your stuff, I always give it a good read. Frequently, I get a good chuckle. And perhaps you can share some of the things that you found meritorious enough to post.
Well, I try to do it once a day, and my vision is going a little bit, and I got a big keyboard, and I can increase the size of the print on the screen, so I can write pretty. Sometimes reading things is a little difficult, and I have been known to make grammatical or punctuation errors, because sometimes a semicolon looks like a colon and a comma, and I don't care. I try the best I can, and I think it does pretty well. I used to go through the ordinances so much and find, like there's an ordinance against getting dressed or undressed in a car in the Ocean Beach parking lot. Now, I know why they had that. Remember when they had bathhouses? And remember when they had woolen bathing suits? They didn't dry out. Today, a bathing suit, you come out of the water in 5 minutes, you're dry. And they're usually combo things. You can put something else over it. And now, there was no ordinance that said you couldn't wrap a towel around a kid and undress or dress them, like my aunts always used to do with me at Ocean Beach, or most kids. You had a couple of people put a towel around a kid, and you took the wet bathing suit off, put a new one on. But there was never an ordinance against that. They had an ordinance to stop you from doing it in a car. Well, they wanted the revenues. They wanted the revenues at the beach house. I can't blame them for that.
But how did they enforce it? And was it ever enforced?
No. I don't know. The only one that would have enforced it was Donald Sloan when he was down the beach. But I don't think it was ever enforced. That's a problem with a law. A law should not be arbitrary, capricious, but it should be able to enforce it. It should be not unreasonable in fines. There were so many laws. It's always coming down here. Remember the car we came next to and you could hear the music?
Yep.
And what did I say? I say, oh, it's okay. See, you can have your car as loud as you want to, if it's moving. But the moment you stop at a stop sign or a stoplight or park your car, you better shut the music off. You don't go to Stop and Shop parking lot and sit there for 15 minutes and broadcast to the assembled shoppers. Some people do. But they don't enforce that law. How are you going to do that? A law that can't be enforced is useless. We had a wonderful graffiti ordinance. I don't know if you recall that I was the first recipient of the graffiti ordinance reward system.
Oh, really?
Council, in its wisdom, decided there was too much graffiti in the city, and so they made an ordinance that said, in essence, if you catch somebody putting graffiti on a building and you turn them in, you get $500. I was coming home from council one night, Hodges Square, pulled up there, and I see two kids spraying on the wall of what was Bellin's drugstore at that time, I think. And I pulled up and said, hey, that's against the law. You got to follow me to the police station. I mean, can you imagine that? Well, they did. These fools followed me to the police station. And I went into the police station entrance and I said, I just caught two kids doing graffiti and they're coming in, going to turn themselves in. And the guy laughed. And I said, no, they really are. And they came in. Now, these kids should have got an award right there of some kind. You know? So I don't know how it worked out, but only one of them got charged, which was a disappointment to me in this respect. I only got $500. However, I got $500, and the only one that ever got it. The kid got fined $25 for doing it.
Just one kid.
One kid. He got fined $25. Now, who got that? Did the city get that $25? No. The state of Connecticut got it. They take the fines, a good portion of them. So the kid got fined $25, and I got $500. I was thinking about renting a bus. You know, if I could get a bus full of kids with some spray paint, I could have retired.
Send them out around town and then pick them up and bring them down to the police station.
I would have paid them $50. See, I'm pretty nice when it comes to sharing. I would have given them $50. They would have get charged $25, and I would have got $500 for a net. I don't know. I don't know how to count well, but I'd get a profit. But see, that's a bad law because it wasn't written well. And I must say that most of the time, bad laws are written by counselors who, I know what you mean. You know, I know what they mean when they'll write a law and it's very clear to everybody. But, you know, if you start analyzing it, it's something wrong in it. And I didn't learn this all at the city. I learned this because I did work for the Hartford Insurance Group. And those people are pretty good on laws. Read your automobile policy sometime. But I'll tell you, this one case that always epitomized a bad law, or one that needs tweaking. A farmer had a policy that said any of his ranch hands, any of his help that had an accident with a tractor plowing the corn, it was covered by the Hartford. So one day, his trained monkey, and I'm not making this up, his trained monkey went off the track and ran into a car and did some damage. The farmer went to the company and said, my ranch hand had an accident and you got to pay for it. And they said, it's a monkey. And he said, it's a ranch hand. Well, how much do you pay him? I pay him room and board. And that's it. And he won. Now you know what happened then. That ordinance or that law got revised because nobody thought of that. We need to do that in New London. We need to take a look at our ordinances and say, gee, wait a minute, we have an ordinance until fairly recently that said everybody that has a oil burner in the city of New London has to have a pail of sand. It's a 1922 ordinance. Has to have a pail of sand next to the oil burner so when it blows up you can throw a pail of sand at it. Now we had that. That was there until the 80s. And I must admit we lost a few ordinances by when the code book got revised. A few ordinances fell off, like the roundhouse ordinance. And this was an ordinance, and it was still active, that said a steam train idling at the roundhouse for more than half an hour has to be shut down. There was a fine. Marty, do you remember the roundhouse?
I don't.
Do you remember a steam train?
I don't. I remember diesel trains, but...
Do you think we need an ordinance that says the steam train must shut down at the roundhouse after half an hour? I think not.
I think you're correct.
Somehow that, you know, editors, and I was editor, and I admit to this mistake, once in a while something falls off, you know, and we miss it and it's gone. And it's gone. And I'm glad.
But you know, you mentioned about the councilors write some of these poor ordinances, and there are occasions, and I remember in my early stint on council, where I was able to secure enough votes that if you were going to serve on a city board or agency, that you had to be up to date on your taxes. You could not be delinquent, and along a party line vote, it passed 4-3 with Lyke and Massid, Nahas, and myself supporting it, and the 3 Democrats not. But at that time, I ended up writing that ordinance because Myron Bell, who was the city attorney, refused to.
Sure.
He refused to. He said, I'm not doing that.
We don't know who writes ordinances. There's nobody charged with writing. They just get the councilors club gets together and somebody says, hey, we should have, I know what, let's have an ordinance that says so-and-so. And then there's some more input, and they are supposed to send it to Myron or whoever was the director of law at that time. And he can choose to look at it and really look at it, or he can say, it's okay. We have that happens with boards and agencies. Do you know we have a film commission in the city?
Yeah, I've had one of Peg Curtin's. She was big on that, if I'm not mistaken.
Do we need a film commission? Do anybody ever make films here?
Not often.
They do, surprisingly, bits and pieces. They made one at the Guard a couple of years ago. Do we get a piece of that? Who knows? But we have a film commission, and that's what they're supposed to do. So we make a film commission, we make an ordinance, we ignore it. Your idea was not a bad idea. It should be. You should be up to date. on taxes.
I mean, we had a handful of people who were serving at owed some serious money at the time, and it was just seemed inappropriate.
You had people who were chairman of or on some boards and agencies, and I think if it was over $25, it was a minimal amount. It wasn't a lot, but I recall one person who got kicked off because he owed the taxes, and which was fortunate because he had reached the end of his. Some terms you can only be on for 2 terms.
Yep.
He was at the end of his 2nd term, and by getting kicked off, and he paid his $25, and he got put back on, he started again, and that worked out.
Sometimes the best laid plans, you try your best. And,
It's true. It's a very difficult thing. My wife was always saying you should have been a lawyer. I think I would have enjoyed being one. I had no background. I wasn't smart enough in high school. I got a little smarter as I got older. We always seem to get smarter as we get older. Did you ever notice how smart your father was?
he was.
Yeah.
But, my father was a rather stoic gentleman. I mean, he not a warm and fuzzy type, but he one time showed me when I was I must have been somewhere between 18 and 22 or 23, but there was a cartoon in the paper, which he never read cartoons, but of an encyclopedia salesman banging on the door of a house, and the father answers the door. He says, "Why would I need an encyclopedia?" And next to him is a long-haired kid. "I've got an 18-year-old son." And he thought that was a hoot.
Yeah.
And the older I get, I think so too. The youngsters think they know it all.
Well, I think a big disappointment for me with the codes and ordinances has been the charter. We went through a lot of trouble and time and effort to have a charter review commission, and it was something I thought we needed. Why have the Charter Revision Commission spend all this time to review everything and go over every word of the charter and find things that obviously got to come out and things that are wrong? Why not have a Charter Review Commission do all that, and then they can put together all their findings and give it to the new Charter Revision Commission, and it saves a lot of time. Well, we did our part. It's all sitting there because nobody's going to call a Charter Revision Commission. And I don't know why. I can have ideas why, but I'm not sure.
Well, I know as a counselor, tried on a number of occasions to get because during campaign season, everybody's for it.
Yeah.
And those who get elected decide that it's not the right time. It's never the right time. But to get a charter review commission established and give them their charge, it would be like dead on arrival. It just never could get off the ground.
I don't know what they're. I don't think we're going to change the form of government. I don't see any move to do that. Personally, I kind of like the city manager form of government myself. I think looking back, what I liked about it was this: as city clerk, Monday night council would meet. Tuesday morning, I had a meeting with the city manager first thing in the morning, and he had a big long sheet of paper. I'm going to do this. I'll call on that one. I'll call up this guy. You publish that. You do this. Would you write a letter to so-and-so? And we all knew what each other was going to do. And it worked out very well because I performed those duties at the behest of the city manager. So if I had to talk to the director of public works, he couldn't go tell me to go pound sand because I was told to go and talk to you about that. And it was awkward sometimes, and sometimes it was awkward on purpose. But it worked very well because everything on that agenda, every agenda item got taken care of right away, or was put off for whatever reason. But the city manager knew the next day everything was done. 2 days, 1 or 2 days, we had every agenda item was put in place. I don't know how they do it today. And I try to watch the council meetings, and I don't know what's going on. I can't even watch council meeting. I don't know what's going on. Do they know what's going on? Do you know what's going on? Do you watch them? I don't.
Well, I don't watch them. But I get the distinct impression that there's a lack of institutional knowledge with the group serving.
I think you're right.
Let's put it that way. I'll try to be polite, but I mean, it's just, John Sadie's the longest serving counselor, and he's been involved and around government his entire life, but the rest of them I'm not quite so sure.
Well, it's probably not a good way to put it, but the history of New London did not start in 1983, which is what I get from the councilors today. It's about as long as they've been around. There's so much to read. You could do they read any books about Decker? He was a professor at Central Connecticut State College. He wrote a nice book that the Historic Commission published. There's any number of decent books about New London that give you. Some of it's glossed over. It's like this whaling thing, and I don't think we got time to get into that tonight. But I'm not really comfortable.
We'll have you back, Clark, for that.
I'm not really. And you're going to think this is silly, but I didn't like the whole idea of Columbo statue being kidnapped and going to Bridgeport or wherever it went.
I didn't like it being defaced.
Defaced? Well, that was by people who listen to voices. That's what they said. They were listening to voices. Okay.
And no repercussions. I mean, that to me was just wrong.
And they made so much of that, and yet here we call ourselves the whaling city. And there was a very, very short period of time we were the whaling city. We weren't New Bedford, but we were the whaling city. We have gotten so much more in revenues over a period of time by the simple invention of a guy on Shore Street called a grinder. That grinder, there isn't a restaurant in New London or any place that haven't had a grinder. Everybody sells. There's more oil has been transported and made use of from grinders than from the sperm whale. And I really think the day that we want to take such pride in killing whales, which is what we did, we killed whales and we killed seals, and we clubbed seals, and we did it for the oil, and it brought revenues into the city. Well, damn it, so did the grinder. And we don't expect to be called the grinder city, but I'm just wondering why we take such pride in being whalers. And I know you are one.
Well, I am, and I'm trying to think now. The Buckley was the Tigers, if I'm not mistaken.
They were the Tigers.
I don't know what Chapman Tech's what they were.
I think they had a hammer.
I don't know. I don't remember. My father and my uncle both went to Tech.
My father did too, and
I can't think of what they were, but when New London High School was formed in 1951 or thereabouts.
It sounds romantic. I mean, it does. Harpoons and all. Remember the big pot they had down at the parade? A big whaling pot, and they used to have harpoons sticking out of it. And it's in front of the Connecticut Historical Society now. That used to be down in the center of State Street years ago. I'm old. I remember these things. And we had a couple of cannon down there. One of the cannons now is up top of Garfield Avenue. And
Williams, Garfield, and Manwaring there.
yeah, the other one gone. They weren't naval cannons. They weren't. They're naval signal cannons. They were worth nothing. They were just decorative. I don't know how I got up there. But you know, if I got time to just tell you the story about the painting at the Lyme and Allen Museum.
Sure.
In the whales. You see, this is what made me think about. I was a guard there for a while. They have a huge painting as you go up the stairs of the Lyme and Allen. And they always got little kiddies, little children. They got to take the docent, takes them around and shows them all. And there was a group of little children. They were maybe kindergarten, first grade, second grade. They went up the stairs, and she's pointing out this magnificent picture. So this is the history of New London. And it's a whale ship. And next to the whale ship, they have a whale, which is being skinned alive by these guys that reach down with these big, long fleshing tools. And you can see the pots are going, they're boiling. And there's a baby whale, because it's losing its mother, it's around. And they're going after the baby whale too. And the little girl, she says, it gets very teary-eyed, and she says, well, didn't that hurt the whales? And the docent was horrified that this stupid little girl would ask a question like that when here's a painting which symbolizes the history of New London, and all she's worrying about is the whales. Is it hurting the whales? Well, you know, grinders don't hurt anybody. And I think we should take more pride in being the home of the grinder, which became the submarine sandwich, which begat Subway, which begat Hoagies and Poor Boys and all those other names. We did it right here.
That's a good story.
Now,
one thing that you mentioned just now is about reading and learning about our city, and you took the time to bring in a book that you wrote and have had published by the London County Historical Society.
Yeah. It's a real book. It's got an Ibsen number, which I've been told is very important. This book was, everything in here is taken from actual documents in the city clerk's office. I didn't go outside for anything. I know a lot of different things happened during this period of World War II of my own knowledge, and we can all read about it. But all of the stuff that happened in this book is just taken from city records, pretty much without exception.
So it's like minutes from council meetings?
Yeah, minutes and letters, and I'm very pleased with the book because it's small, it's short, but World War II was short too by war standards. The first day, though, the city council had such a challenge, worst challenge of its career in every council meeting. They met on December the 8th, 1941. It was a Monday. We went to war Sunday. There must have been 500 people in the council chambers. And they went to the councilors and they said, what do we do now? What are we going to do next? We got a war. What are you going to do about it? You know, we weren't ready for that. But one of the councilors, it's in the book, one of the councilors said, we got to have an ID card program. We got to have IDs for everybody that comes into town. We need to have anybody that comes into New London and stays here for more than 12 hours is got to have an ID. We got to know who they are. And I'm saying, you know, you say so, well, gee, we didn't have the twin bridges at the time, but we still had a lot of traffic going back and forth, and trains, and the Navy here, and you know, there's a lot of people coming and going now, and boats coming in. Oh no, we want to know who these people are, who these aliens or whoever they are, people that decide to go to war with us. Who are they? Well, they mulled about it. And to his credit, Attorney Eschenfelder at one point says, wait a minute, this is America. You can't do this. He said, they do this in Germany. Well, let me see your papers. We can't do this. And they all kind of sat back and said, yeah, we can't do this. We can't. You couldn't physically do it anyway. Can't do this. What are we going to do? We put so many hours into this, the whole night they put into it. What are we going to do? And then some other brilliant counselor said, let's license shoeshine boys. And I'm not making that up. He said, we need to know who the shoeshine boys are. We got to give them IDs. And so they had this program all set up to who would issue the ideas, and all of that figured out. And they said, good, we'll just apply it to shoeshine boys. And we got a shoeshine boy ordinance that they had to carry an ID when they were doing business in New
And
London.
is that still in place?
No. And that's what we did on December here's a picture of the shoeshine boy.
Yep. Boot black with his kit, yeah.
And that's what we did. That's what council did on December the 8th,
Yeah.
1940.
I mean, I remember as a young boy when the Crocker House still had some juice as a hotel, and you had the barber shop downstairs, and there would be a shoe shine in the Crocker House.
Yeah. And next to the Capitol Theater.
So I mean, in those days, that was it was still a.
Oh yeah, it was wonderful.
You know, people didn't wear sneakers for formal wear.
No, it was a different time. But we, it's a reaction you have a lot of to an event. An event, you're not ready for it. You know, you haven't planned on it. Something happens. I know the council went through something with the dog pound. That was a problem for a while. I think you recall that. And you're not ready for this thing, and maybe too quick to make an ordinance. So, see, they were going to make an ordinance that night that you couldn't implement. You couldn't control it. And, you know, you'd have to kind of rely on the government's going to have a whole bunch of ID card stuff. You know.
Well, who's going to administer this? Who's going to do it? Who's going to enforce it?
Yeah.
Not very well thought out.
But we put air raid wardens on top of the buildings at Connecticut College with glasses and identification charts for the Messerschmitts in case they flew over. Germany did not have an aircraft carrier, and they also didn't have planes that could go that far. But we had air raid wardens. Waldo Clark was the head of the air raid wardens, and their meeting place was upstairs over Dutch Tavern. That's where they met, and they had beer and sandwiches every week, and they talked about different configurations of aircraft that might come over.
Amazing.
And that's in there too. And another one that's in here is we didn't have any aviation gasoline storage. You had Trumbull Field, but they didn't have any gasoline storage. They had little small tanks. We had big tanks. Where did we have them? Down at the State Pier, almost under where the bridges are now. We had big, they were oil tanks. But we dumped out the oil, they took the oil out, and they filled them with aviation gasoline. Now, you'd have to talk to a fire department person, but there was a law that said you had to have berms around the tank that would hold the oil that leaked or something. You can't hold gasoline. I mean, that goes, it just goes. So we spent the whole war with a potential bomb down there at State Pier, and everybody looked the other way. Right there at the railroad yards, we could have, if that ever got hit by something, it would have made the biggest explosion you ever saw.
It's unbelievable. I mean, yeah, I'm so tickled that you have come down to the studio tonight to share your stories and your thoughts. It's been amazing, and I hope we can get you back in here.
Well, I'll tell you
from
what.
time to time, because I mean, there's so many different things that you could spin a yarn on here that I enjoy. I have a feeling our audience does too.
I would get off of the city clerk and city thing. I'll tell you about my time in the Coast Guard. That's a lot of fun.
Well, it's in my notes. I mean, here I'll introduce him now since we're getting close to. I mean, retired city clerk. You mentioned insurance, state peer. You're a Mason. You're an elk.
No more elk, I'm afraid.
Well,
kind of demitted on the elks.
But you've been an elk.
Yeah, I have.
You've. I'm not sure. You collect. Not silver, but what, sterling silverware, flatware, and
yeah. I used to. I don't so much anymore. We used to collect a lot of things like that.
You know, and you mentioned the Coast Guard, and you grew up in Groton, and your wife and daughter, and you're an author. I mean, we could do a program on almost any one of these things.
Well, the Coast Guard was fun because coming from New London, I always had a little boat. I joined the Coast Guard Reserves in New London. I went to the Coast Guard Academy for a couple of 3 years, going to reserve meetings and weekend meetings and weekly in the summertime. And then I wanted to go on active duty. And do you know where they sent me? Not to California, via the Suez Canal, via the Panama Canal. No, not even to the Cape. They sent me to New London. So my career in the Coast Guard started in my own backyard, which ticked off the officer of the ship that I was eventually on, the 95-footer, because his idea and my idea of navigation was a little different. He had a protractor and a compass, and I just said, go over there.
Oh, boy. Well, listen, folks, you've been watching City Focus tonight. I'm Marty Olsen, your host, and I've been joined tonight by Clark Lyke, and we've had a ball. And Clark, I want to thank you for coming out, and it's been a real joy, and we'll do it again. And we'll see you again next week, folks. Good night.
Good night.